Rain lashed against the car windows. Sarah squinted through the downpour. The headlights struggled to pierce the darkness. She was running late, miles from anywhere familiar. Then through the sheets of rain a sign flickered. Seaview Hotel. Vacancy. Relief tinged with apprehension washed over her. The wrought iron gates groaned open as she drove into the courtyard. Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the imposing facade of the hotel. It stood tall and imposing, a Victorian mansion with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. She hurried towards the heavy wooden doors, seeking refuge from the oppressive atmosphere. The lobby was dimly lit, a single chandelier casting long shadows across the worn Persian rugs and dusty velvet furniture. Cobwebs clung to the corners of ornate picture frames, their subjects obscured by grime and time. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of damp and decay. It felt like stepping into a forgotten era, a place where time had stood still. Behind a massive oak counter, a man sat hunched over a book. He looked up as Sarah approached, his face half hidden in shadow. His eyes, though, were sharp and piercing, taking in her every detail.
Welcome to the Seaview, ma'am. Hope you find it comfortable.
He pushed a heavy registry book towards her. The inkwell on the counter was dry and cracked, a testament to the hotel's neglect. As Sarah signed her name, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, observed by unseen eyes. The silence was broken only by the creaking of the building and the howling wind outside, now picking up again. The man handed her a heavy tarnished key, its tag etched with the number 403.
Top floor, end of the hall. No elevator, I'm afraid. Stairs are a bit temperamental.
He didn't elaborate. His gaze lingered on Sarah for a moment too long, a strange, unsettling smile playing on his lips. Sarah gripped the key tightly, her knuckles turning white. The encounter had left her feeling deeply unsettled. She wished now that she had braved the storm, driven further until she found a brighter, more welcoming place to spend the night. But it was too late to turn back now. The climb to the top floor was long and arduous. The air grew colder with each step, the silence heavier. The only sound was the creaking of the wooden stairs beneath her feet. By the time she reached the fourth floor, she was out of breath, her heart pounding in her chest. The hallway was narrow and dark, lit by a single flickering light bulb that cast grotesque shadows on the walls. Room 403 was at the very end of the hallway, its door slightly ajar. A cold draft emanated from within, sending a shiver down Sarah's spine. She pushed the door open cautiously, stepping inside. The room was larger than she expected, but sparsely furnished. A four-poster bed with heavy velvet curtains dominated one wall. A single window, partially boarded up, offered a glimpse of the stormy night outside. The air was stale and heavy, thick with the scent of dust and mildew. It felt as if the room hadn't been occupied in decades, yet there was a strange familiarity about it.
This place feels oddly familiar.
Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. The temperature in the room was noticeably colder than the hallway. She set her suitcase down on the floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. The storm outside raged on, the wind howling like a banshee. Rain lashed against the window pane, the sound like fingernails scraping against glass. Sarah moved towards the window, peering out into the darkness. The storm seemed to have intensified, the wind whipping the trees into a frenzy. Turning away from the unsettling scene outside, Sarah moved towards the bed. She pulled back the heavy velvet curtains, her breath catching in her throat. The sheets were pristine white, freshly laundered, a stark contrast to the dusty surroundings. It was as if someone had been expecting her.
Suddenly, a gust of wind slammed the bedroom door shut with a deafening bang.
Sarah jumped, her heart racing. She turned towards the door, her hand flying to her throat. She could have sworn she had locked it, but now it was firmly closed. She tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The door was locked.
Panic welled up inside her. She rattled the handle again, harder this time, but it was no use. She was trapped.
She took a step back, her eyes darting around the room, searching for another way out. That's when she saw it, a flicker of movement in the far corner of the room, near the wardrobe. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, seemed to be coalescing, taking on a vaguely human form. Sarah called out, her voice trembling. There was no answer, only the pounding of her own heart and the howling wind outside. She took a tentative step towards the shadow, her eyes narrowed. S1, hello?
As she got closer, she thought she heard a faint whispering, like voices carried on the wind.
The whispers seemed to be coming from the corner where the shadows stood. They were soft, indistinct, but undeniably there. Sarah strained to make out the words, but they remained tantalizingly out of reach. She took another step closer, her heart pounding in her chest.
The shadow remained still, a dark silhouette against the gloom.
But the whispering grew louder, more insistent. Sarah could almost feel a presence now, something cold and unseen standing just beyond the veil of darkness. Fear, primal and consuming, washed over her.
A sudden gust of icy wind swept through the room, extinguishing the single lamp on the bedside table and plunging Sarah into darkness.
She could feel the unseen presence closing in on her, its cold, malevolent energy pressing down on her like a physical weight. The whispers intensified, swirling around her like a vortex of lost souls. Sarah stood frozen in terror, her breath caught in her throat. S1, oh no!
What was that?
She recoiled with a cry, her heart pounding in her chest. The touch was fleeting but unmistakable.
Please, make it stop.
She closed her eyes, her mind reeling, trying to rationalize the impossible, but there was no escaping the terrifying reality of her situation. Time seemed to stand still. Sarah huddled on the floor, her back against the wall, her eyes squeezed shut. The whispering continued unabated. A chorus of disembodied voices that seemed to seep into her very being, whispering her name, beckoning her towards something dark and unknown.
How long has it been?
She couldn't say how long she remained trapped in that state of paralyzing fear. It felt like an eternity. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind sent shivers down her spine. She was certain that the shadowy figure was still there, lurking just beyond the reach of her senses, watching her, waiting for her. The storm raged on outside, mirroring the turmoil within her, but as the hours slowly crept by, the whispers began to fade, replaced by a heavy silence that was somehow even more unnerving. The oppressive presence in the room lifted, leaving behind a residue of coldness and a lingering sense of unease. Just when Sarah felt her sanity beginning to fray, a faint glimmer of light appeared at the edges of the boarded-up window. Dawn was breaking. Relief so profound it brought tears to her eyes washed over her. She had survived the night. As the light slowly filtered into the room, chasing away the shadows, the events of the night took on a surreal, dreamlike quality.
Was it all just a nightmare?
Had she imagined it all? Had the terror and isolation played tricks on her mind? She looked around the room, but it was empty. The shadowy figure, the whispers, the chilling touch were all gone. With the first rays of sunlight, a newfound determination surged through her. She would not allow fear to control her any longer. She scrambled to her feet and rushed to the door. This time it opened easily, as if releasing her from its grasp. She practically fled from the room, her suitcase bumping behind her. Sarah didn't stop running until she reached the sanctuary of her car. As she drove away from the imposing facade of the Seaview Hotel, the rising sun painting the sky in hues of gold and rose, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced back at the hotel, its windows now reflecting the morning light. It looked almost peaceful, almost ordinary, but she knew the truth. Beneath its veneer of faded grandeur, the Seaview Hotel harbored secrets, dark and ancient. and she would never forget the horrors that unfolded in the shadows of room 403.
I'll never forget, never.
Though the sun had risen, casting away the literal shadows, a part of Sarah knew that some shadows never truly disappear. They lingered in the recesses of the mind, a chilling reminder of the unseen forces that lie just beyond our perception, waiting for the right moment to make themselves known. And she knew, with a certainty that sent shivers down her spine, that she would never be truly free of the shadows that haunted room 403.